I didn't go to the casino because I needed money. That's the story I tell myself anyway. I went because it was Thursday, my back hurt from sitting in a cubicle all week, and I wanted noise that wasn't the news or my own thoughts. My wife, Mara, had taken a late shift at the clinic. The house felt too quiet. I told her I might grab a burger with Kevin from work. That was true in a way. Kevin did come. He just met me at a place with no windows and a carpet designed to keep you walking in circles. I was 42 and I thought I was responsible. No credit card balances. A respectable 401k. Our mortgage paid on time. We argued about budgets the way other couples argued about sex. Awkwardly and with long pauses. I brought $200 in cash. I left my debit card at home on purpose, like it was some moral choice. The casino smelled like a mix of citrus cleaner and stale perfume. Everything blinked and chimed in a key that made it hard to think. Kevin played blackjack with the kind of practiced looseness that always made me suspicious. I drifted toward the slots because there's no pretense there. You sit, you lose, you leave. I fed $20 bills into a machine with a wolf on it. The chair was warm, like someone had just gotten up. I told myself I'd do 10 spins and then stop. That's what I always told myself. On spin 8, nothing happened. On spin 9, I hit a bonus round and won $80. My body did that little stupid surge. Heart up, hands light, as if I'd accomplished something. I cashed out, switched to a different machine, and sat down again, feeling disciplined because I'd moved away from my machine like that meant I wasn't attached. I put in another 20. The screen flashed. The wolf howled. Lights strobed in my peripheral vision. Then the machine went silent for half a beat and the whole thing exploded into a sound like falling coins, only louder and cleaner. The screen filled with zeros. Cartoon Vault cracked open. Jackpot, it said in letters that looked like they were shouting. I stared because my brain didn't have a category for it. A woman in a blazer appeared behind me. Then a man with a badge on a lanyard. They spoke in calm, practice tones, like flight attendants telling you the plane is on fire but everything is fine. Congratulations, sir. They asked for my ID. They asked if anyone else had touched the machine. They asked if I was a U.S. citizen. I answered like I was taking a test I hadn't studied for. Kevin materialized and let out a low whistle. Holy! He stopped himself, glancing at the blazer. They printed something. A small crowd formed the way it does when something breaks in public. I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck, greedy and resentful at the same time. The number on the sheet was $187,460. 23. It wasn't Powerball money. It wasn't quit your job money. But it was enough to make every plan I'd been quietly building feel suddenly negotiable. It was enough to buy breathing room, enough to fix the roof, enough to pay off Mara's student loans, enough to stop pretending we weren't tired. I signed forms. They explained taxes. They offered a check or a wire. I chose a check because it felt more real, like something I could hold. They told me I'd get a W-2G, that a portion would be withheld. I nodded as if I understood more than you don't get to keep all of it. When I finally walked out, the night air was cold and sharp. I sat in my car for a full minute with the check in my wallet, just breathing, feeling like a door had opened somewhere. I drove home too carefully. Mara was at the kitchen table when I got in, still in scrubs, hair pulled back in that tight knot she wore when she was tired. The overhead light made her look older than she was. There was a mug in front of her and an untouched piece of toast. "You're late," she said. Not accusing, just stating. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't want to ruin it by making it ordinary language. "I went to the casino with Kevin," I said. Her eyebrows lifted. "You hate casinos." "I know." I sat across from her, hands on the table. "I won." "How much?" When I told her, she didn't gasp. She didn't laugh. Her face went still, like someone had turned down the volume inside her. "That's a lot," she said. "It is." I watched her, waiting for joy to show up. She reached across and took my hand. Her palm was cold. "Okay," she said too quickly. "Okay, we'll be smart. We'll pay down the loans, we'll." Her voice had that slightly bright edge she got when she was trying to control a situation with optimism. I told myself her restraint meant she trusted me to manage it, that she knew I would do the responsible thing. I did not consider that she might be trying not to panic. The next few days felt like carrying a secret under my shirt. At work I answered emails and sat in meetings while my brain kept drifting to the check, to the way the number looked on paper. At night I lay in bed next to Mara and listened to her breathe, thinking about what we could fix. We agreed out loud to tell no one until the money cleared. Mara insisted on that. People get weird, she said. Family gets weird. Let's just handle it first. That sounded reasonable. I liked that it made us a team. I deposited the check at our bank on Monday. The teller's smile became professional and careful when she saw it. She asked if I wanted to sit with a banker. I said no. I wanted to get out of there before my face gave me away. 2 days later, the funds were available. Our account balance looked like a typo. That night, Mara opened a spreadsheet at the kitchen table. She had columns labeled debts, repairs, savings, tax cushion. I felt proud of us. I felt like the kind of couple who got through things. Then she added a new line item near the top. Immediate. What's that? I asked. She didn't look up. Just something we need to take care of. Her tone was neutral. Her fingers moved quickly. Need to take care of what? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral too. She sighed and finally met my eyes. Can we not do this right now? Just trust me. It's complicated. That was the first time the win stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like a lever. Over the next week, Mara became meticulous in a way that made my skin itch. She checked the front window twice before bed. She kept her phone face down. She flinched when the mail hit the slot. On Friday, she asked me to withdraw $10,000 in cash. No, I said, reflexively, like a parent catching a kid reaching for the stove. It's our money, she said, then softened. I know it sounds bad. I just need it. For what? She stood at the sink and stared at a spot on the counter. For something that will go away if we pay it. My stomach went tight. Mara. She exhaled through her nose, like she was choosing which truth to hand me. I borrowed money, she said. A while back. I was going to pay it off. Then the interest, it got out of control. From who? I asked. She hesitated just long enough. A private lender. That phrase meant nothing and everything. It sounded like something you'd hear in a commercial and something you'd hear in a police report. How much? I asked. She swallowed. 38. 38,000? I said because I needed her to correct me. She nodded once, small. I felt heat rise in my face. Shame before anger, because the first thing I thought was, how did I not know? We can pay it, she said quickly. That's the point. The jackpot fixes it. It's over. I stared at her and tried to line up the woman in front of me with the person I'd been sharing a life with. Why? I asked. What did you borrow it for? Her eyes flickered. It doesn't matter now. It mattered. It mattered so much it made my hands shake. But I nodded anyway. That's the first morally questionable thing I did. I chose relief over clarity. I withdrew the 10,000. The bank manager asked if everything was okay. I lied with a smile that made my cheeks hurt. That afternoon, Mara took the envelope and left the house. She said she was meeting someone in a parking lot near the mall. She said I shouldn't come. It'll make it worse, she told me. I sat on the couch and watched a documentary I couldn't absorb. Every time headlights swept across the living room wall, I felt my pulse jump. When she came back, she looked lighter, almost buoyant, like she just stepped out of a hot shower. She kissed me hard enough that it felt like an apology. It's done, she whispered against my mouth. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to put the whole thing into a box labeled, past mistake, and slide it onto a shelf. That night, she slept deeply for the first time in weeks. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, doing math. 38,000. 10,000 down. 28 left. If the win hadn't happened, what would she have done? I didn't ask. I told myself I didn't want to punish her for being honest. even though she hadn't been honest until money forced her hand. A letter arrived the following Tuesday, addressed to Mara but with my name in smaller print under hers. Official notice in the window, the kind of envelope that makes your throat tighten before you even open it. I wasn't snooping. I was bringing in the mail. I saw my name and did what any responsible spouse does. I opened it because I assumed it was a mistake we could fix. It was a notice of intent to garnish. Not her wages, our joint account, for a judgment. The creditor wasn't a private lender in a parking lot. It was a business name I recognized because I'd seen it on a billboard near the highway. A debt collection firm. The amount listed wasn't $38,000. It was $96,214. 17. My hands went numb. The words blurred for a second, then came back sharp. I read it 3 times. I checked the date. I checked the case number. I checked the part that listed co-debtor. My name, my social security number partially masked. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter flat in front of me, like it might explode. When Mara got home, I didn't yell. I didn't throw it at her. I slid it across the table. Her face collapsed in slow motion. "This is," she started. "Don't," I said quietly. My voice sounded like someone else's. "Just tell me." She sat down hard. Her hands fluttered once, then went still. "It was supposed to be temporary," she said. "What was?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "I took out a loan. Not the student loans. Another one. For my brother." That was twist number 1 that recontextualized everything. The responsible Mara, the woman who reminded me to set up automatic transfers to savings, had been funneling money into something I'd never seen. "Your brother," I said. "Evan." Evan was 45 and chronically reinventing himself. Fitness coaching, a pressure washing business, a craft beer startup. Always one step away from success. Always needing just a little help. "He was going to lose his house," she whispered. "The kids would have had to move. He promised he'd pay me back." "And you put me on it," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at me then, eyes shiny with something that wasn't quite tears. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "They wouldn't approve me alone." "You forged my signature," I said, because the words were in my mouth and they tasted like metal. She didn't deny it. I went numb in a way that felt almost clean. Anger would come later. First, there was the pure, suffocating shame of realizing I'd been living inside someone else's story. I pulled our credit reports that night while Mara sat on the couch staring at her hands. There were 2 personal loans I didn't recognize. One credit card opened in my name with a balance just under its limit. A line of credit tied to Evan's business, closed, charged off, sold to collections. All of it clustered in the last 3 years. All of it hidden behind paperless statements and a P.O. box Mara had been paying for with cash withdrawals I'd never questioned because they'd been small enough to blend into grocery runs and gas. I thought about every time she'd insisted we keep our finances simple. Every time she'd offered to handle the bills because she had more time. She didn't have more time. She had more secrets. "You were going to tell me?" I asked finally. She nodded too fast. "Yes. Every time I tried, it got worse. And then the collectors started calling. And I kept thinking if I could just catch up." "And Evan?" I asked. She flinched. "He stopped answering me." So there it was. Money had been the central force in our marriage for years, and I'd been treating it like a shared chore, not a weapon. I should have walked out then. I didn't. I told myself I was steady, rational, the adult in the room. Instead, I opened our bank app and did more math. The jackpot was big enough to cover it. Big enough to erase her lies with cash. That was my second morally questionable choice. I decided that paying could substitute for accountability. We met with a lawyer on Thursday. A calm woman with silver hair who spoke in bullet points. She explained that because the loans were in my name, the creditors didn't care about the marital backstory. We could dispute. We could file a police report for identity theft. But if we did that, Mara could face charges. At minimum, it would blow up our lives in a new direction. Mara gripped my hand so hard my fingers tingled. "Please," she whispered when the lawyer stepped out. I saw her not as a villain, not as a victim, just as a person cornered by her own choices. I hated her and I loved her in the same breath, and that made me hate myself too. "I'm not sending you to jail," I said. Relief flooded her face so fast it was embarrassing. We agreed to pay. We'd negotiate settlements. We'd close accounts. We'd rebuild. The lawyer talked about cleaning up like it was a spill on carpet. That night, Mara cooked my favorite meal. She poured wine. She laughed too loudly at something on TV. She acted like we'd made it through. In bed, she pressed her forehead to mine. "This is the worst thing I've ever done," she said. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I believed her because I needed to. That was the false resolution. I felt the crisis recede like a tide, leaving a damp mess but no drowning. It unraveled in a way that was almost bureaucratic. When you deposit a large check and start moving money, wires, cashier's checks, settlements, systems notice. Banks file reports. Casinos file reports. Everything above a certain threshold becomes a little flag in someone's spreadsheet. 2 weeks after we paid the first settlement, our joint account was frozen. I was at work when my card declined trying to buy a sandwich. The cashier gave me that look, like I was trying to scam her over $12. I called the bank and got transferred 3 times before a man finally said, "There's a hold due to a legal order." "What legal order?" I asked, voice too loud in my car. "I can't give details," he said. "You'll receive documentation." I drove home with my hands locked on the wheel. Mara was in the driveway when I pulled in, as if she'd been waiting for me. Her face told me she already knew. In the mailbox was another official envelope, this one from the IRS. It wasn't a bill. It was a notice of levy. They were claiming a right to seize funds from our account to satisfy a tax debt. Not mine. Not Mara's. Evan's business. I read the name twice. Same LLC. Same address from the credit report. My throat went dry. "How?" I said, not even forming a full question. Mara's eyes went to the side, like she was tracking something in the air. He used our address," she whispered. "For paperwork." "Did you sign something?" I asked. She started shaking her head before I finished. No, I didn't. But the notice listed me as a responsible party. It referenced documents filed years ago. I looked at her and saw the pattern. Money, secrecy, signatures. Twist number 2. Evan's mess wasn't just debt. It was tax liability, and somehow my name was tied to it. I called Evan. Straight to voicemail. I texted. No response. Mara drove to his house the next day. She came back pale, eyes wide. "They're gone," she said. "The house is empty. Neighbors said they left a week ago." She sounded like someone describing a fire after the smoke has cleared. I filed a request for transcripts with the IRS. I spent hours on hold. I downloaded forms I didn't understand. I found out, piece by piece, what responsible party meant when it came to payroll taxes. Evan had filed paperwork listing me as an officer of his LLC. The signature on it looked like mine in the way a stranger's forgery looks like yours if you only glance. I pulled the document from a state website. My name, my address, my supposed title. I held my phone up to Mara. "This," I said, "is you." She covered her mouth with her hand and started crying. Not sobbing, not dramatic, just tears streaming like her face had given up. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, voice muffled. "He said they'd go after him if he didn't have someone with good credit. He said it was just for a few months. He said he'd fix it." "You made me an officer in a business I've never seen," I said, feeling something crack in my chest. "You volunteered me. It was family," she whispered, like that was a magic phrase that turned poison into medicine. Twist number 3. The jackpot didn't just fix her old lies. It triggered scrutiny that pulled hidden fraud into daylight. And my name was on it. Part 13. The next month was a blur of calls, paperwork, and humiliation. I met with a tax attorney who charged more per hour than I made in a day. He spoke in calm, measured sentences while my life fell apart in slow motion. He told me we could fight it, argue identity theft, argue lack of involvement, But the IRS doesn't care about your feelings. They care about signatures and records, and the burden would be on me to prove I wasn't who the paperwork said I was. Meanwhile, our account stayed frozen. Our mortgage payment bounced. The bank sent an email that looked polite and felt like a threat. I took a cash advance on my own credit card just to keep the lights on, which felt like stepping into the same trap Mara had set years earlier. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I started hiding money too. I took $3,000 in cash from my card advance and put it in a metal box in the garage behind old paint cans. I told myself it was emergency money. I told myself it was smart. But it also felt like control. Like if the system could freeze my accounts, at least it couldn't freeze what I could hold. Mara watched me do it and didn't comment. She looked smaller these days, shoulders curled forward, as if she could shrink out of her own choices. One night she said, "Maybe we should just tell the police." The idea that she could suggest that now, after begging me not to, made something cold settle in me. "I'm not ruining my own life to make you feel better," I said. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Shame turned into anger then. Not explosive, not cinematic, just a steady burn that made every memory replay with new lighting. Part 14. The final twist arrived in a plain envelope from the casino. "Notice of adjustment," it said. They were amending the payout documentation. They'd received a legal request related to the winnings, and due to ongoing investigation, they were placing a portion of the jackpot in escrow until matters were resolved. It wasn't the whole amount, we'd already spent a chunk on settlements and fees, but it was enough that the math stopped working. The money we'd relied on as a solution was now itself entangled. The casino's letter referenced third-party claims. The attorney explained what that likely meant. If the government believed the funds were connected to tax evasion or fraud, they could argue that winnings deposited into a commingled account were reachable. It didn't matter that I'd won by sitting in a chair and pressing a button. Money isn't moral. It's just traceable. Mara sat at the kitchen table reading the letter with her fingers trembling. "So what now?" she whispered. I looked around our kitchen. The chipped counter edge, the magnet collection on the fridge, the place we'd eaten thousands of quiet dinners. And I felt an emptiness that wasn't sadness exactly. It was the absence of an assumption I'd lived with my whole adult life. That if you did things right, you were safe. "I don't know," I said. That night, I slept on the couch. Mara didn't argue. From the living room, I could hear her in our bedroom, moving around softly like a stranger in a hotel. The jackpot had changed the air in the house. It had revealed what was already there, like turning on a bright light and seeing the stains. We didn't have a dramatic breakup. There was no screaming, no thrown rings, just paperwork and silence and the constant drip of consequences. Mara moved into her sister's place. She left with 2 suitcases and a laundry basket, like she was going away for a weekend. She hugged me at the door and said, "I'm sorry," in a voice so small it made my throat tighten. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't say I didn't. I just nodded because any words felt like they'd be lies in one direction or another. The IRS case is still open. The attorney says it could take years. My credit is bruised in ways I don't like looking at. The money I hid in the garage is mostly gone. Spent on late fees, groceries, keeping the mortgage from collapsing. The jackpot number that once looked like a door now looks like a flare that gave away our position. Sometimes I replay that first night at the casino. The warm chair, the artificial howl of the wolf, the flood of lights. I remember how my body felt when I realized something huge had happened for me. To me, without effort. I used to think the worst thing money could do was disappear. Now I know it can arrive, too, loudly, brightly, then peel back everything you've been calling stable and show you the cheap wiring underneath. And the unsettling part isn't that Mara lied, or that Evan ran, or that the government can freeze a life with a form letter. It's that, some nights, I still catch myself thinking about that machine, about the moment it all lit up, and feeling a flicker of something that might be longing.